Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Chapter 21. I rolled over in bed carefully, trying not to wake Benny, though, honestly, I doubted even a hurricane could disturb him. His mouth hung open, a little drool forming at the corner, and a deep, throaty snore escaped his lips every few seconds. Groaning quietly, I buried my head under the pillow, hoping to block out the noise. It didn't help much. My eyes squeezed shut as I tried to force myself to sleep, but my mind was far too awake. The clock on the nightstand glowed 2:07 a.m. The moonlight spilling through the window painted the room silver. Benny mumbled something about flying chocolate squirrels, his hand flicking off the blanket before scratching his stomach. I stared at him in disbelief, half amused and half envious that he could dream so easily. His face relaxed into a small smile as he turned over. I sighed, propping my head on my pillow, watching his back rise and fall. Benny's build was broader than mine, but softer, nothing like Nico's lean, muscular frame that kept sneaking into my thoughts. When Benny's blanket slipped off, I pulled it back up to cover him, but the simple act only made me realize something. Looking at Benny, I felt nothing. No spark. No flutter. Just comfort. But when I thought of Nico, his grin, his voice, the way he looked at me, it was a completely different story. I shook my head quickly, sitting up. My imagination was doing that thing again, replacing reality with memories I shouldn't linger on. Get a grip, I muttered to myself, sliding quietly out of bed. I slipped on my glasses, zipped up my blue hoodie over my pajama top, and grabbed the house keys from the table. My mismatched outfit, green checkered pajama bottoms and black slippers, wasn't exactly ideal, but at that hour, I didn't care. Outside, the night air was crisp and cool. The sea breeze brushed against my face, and I shivered, pulling the hoodie tighter. The only sounds were the distant crash of waves and the rustle of palm trees. By the time I reached the beach, the world felt calm again. The sand was soft beneath my feet, warm from the day's heat but gentle under the moonlight. I walked until I reached a small cluster of smooth rocks near the water and sat down. My toes dipped into the cool waves, tracing circles in the shallow water. The peace was nice, until my thoughts wandered back to him. I pulled out my phone, staring at the last message on the screen. Nico Beckett, 3:15 p.m. You must miss me was. I rolled my eyes, whispering under my breath, cocky as ever. Still, I couldn't deny that those words had been haunting me all day. They echoed in my head during dinner, while brushing my teeth, and even now, under the moonlight. No matter how much I tried to ignore it, thoughts of Nico always found a way back. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed and erased a dozen replies already. I don't miss you. You're so full of yourself. Stop teasing me. Each time I deleted them, none of them felt right. My heart beat faster as I finally typed something simple, something honest. I miss you. Before I could change my mind, my phone buzzed violently in my hand. Whoa! I yelped softly as the screen lit up. The vibration startled me so badly I almost dropped it into the water. My heart skipped when I saw the name flashing on the screen. Nico Beckett. I blinked at it in disbelief. Was he psychic or something? Swallowing hard, I swiped to answer and pressed the phone to my ear, trying to sound calm. Nico! I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. A low chuckle echoed through the speaker, followed by his smooth, familiar tone. So you're awake? Thinking about me? I froze. What? No. I sputtered. I just couldn't sleep. Benny snores like a vacuum cleaner. Nico laughed softly on the other end. He's with you. In the background, I could hear the faint hum of a car engine, the sound of tires against the road, and maybe even music playing quietly. Wait, are you driving right now? I asked, frowning. That's not safe, Nico. You shouldn't be talking on the phone while driving. Why is Benny with you? He asked again, ignoring my question this time. What's with the interrogation? I said, sitting up straighter on the rock. His tone was unusually serious, which threw me off. My dad couldn't come, I explained after a moment. He got called into work. So Benny came along. No big deal. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, long enough for the waves to fill the gap between us. Then Nico spoke again, his voice lower now. So, you're sharing a room with him? I blinked, caught completely off guard. We're sharing a room, yes. Why? Nico didn't answer right away. I could almost hear him breathe through the line, quiet but intense. Just wondering, he finally said, his tone unreadable. The line went quiet again, and I stared out at the silver horizon, wondering why his question made my chest feel heavier than the waves crashing below. What? I asked, my voice coming out higher than expected. Are we sleeping? Wait, what do you know? We're just sharing a bed. Sleeping. That's it. Together, but not together. My words tumbled out faster than my thoughts. I mean, it's better that he sleeps next to me than my sister. Or my mom. Oh my gosh, that's not what I groaned, burying my face in my hands as the words kept spiraling. My mind flashed back to Benny's bare torso, and against my will, that image shifted into Nico's. No one is sleeping with anyone, I blurted, mostly to myself. The other end of the line was quiet. Too quiet. Nico, I said nervously, my stomach twisting. Seriously, I'm not. Nico's laughter cut through my rambling. The sound was warm and rich, even through the static of the call. I was just kidding, Wes, Nico said finally, his voice breathless from laughing. But I've got to say, seeing you get that flustered doesn't exactly help your case. Shut up, I muttered, splashing my feet in the water to shake off the heat rising in my chest. It didn't work. Anyway, why are you driving so late? Where even are you? He didn't answer immediately, and the silence made my nerves spike. A dozen thoughts raced through my head, where he might be, who he might be with. I told myself it didn't matter, that I had no reason to care, but my heart didn't seem to agree. Things between us had changed. I had changed. I liked talking to Nico more than I wanted to admit. Being around him had become easy, even comforting. I no longer froze when he brushed my hand or leaned in close. And each day that passed, it felt like I wanted more of that closeness. But deep down, I knew I wasn't the same for him. After all, who was I to Nico Beckett? The guy everyone admired, the one who could make people fall for him with a single look. I'd seen how easily others were drawn to him, how many probably ended up in his bed, the one that smelled like him, the one that fit the shape of his body. And then there was me. Just me. The boy who got drunk and stumbled into the wrong room at the right time. It could have been anyone that night. Anyone sitting beside him in his car. Anyone he kissed on a quiet evening, testing boundaries. But for me, it couldn't have been anyone else. Wes. Nico's voice pulled me back to reality. Why yeah? I stammered. Did you fall asleep on me? He asked, pretending to sound offended. I laughed softly, shaking my head. I'm still here. Good, Nico said with a quiet hum. You asked where I am, right? I'm pulled over on the freeway. Heading home. At 2 a.m.? I thought, frowning. From where? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Nico didn't answer right away. The soft beep of his car came through the line, followed by the faint hum of the engine. Hey, don't talk while driving, I said quickly. Worried about me? He teased, that familiar smirk laced into his words. Not at all, I replied, maybe a little too fast. I just think it'd be a really dumb way to go. So, you are worried, Nico said, clearly smiling. I sighed in defeat, rolling my eyes even though he couldn't see me. Where were you all night? Work, he said simply. Work. I echoed, surprised. My hands, which I hadn't realized were clenched, slowly relaxed. Don't sound so shocked, Nico chuckled. Belle's retired, and her pension doesn't cover much. I've got to help out, even if the pay isn't great. There's not much you can do when you're still in school. Wait, where do you work? A bar in the city, he answered. A bar? I frowned. Aren't you too young to? I'm 18, remember? He said, amusement in his tone. Oh, right. I felt my face heat up in embarrassment. I'd forgotten he was a year older. He'd repeated a grade last year. Still, I continued, switching my phone to the other ear as I listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing. Isn't that hard? Balancing school and work. There's a reason I'm usually late, Nico replied lightly. Though, honestly, I'd probably still be late even if I didn't have a job. That sounds about right, I said with a small laugh. Do you work every day? Mostly weekends and Fridays. Sometimes midweek if they need me. So, you work Sundays too? I asked. But you still come to school Monday morning. Don't you get tired? Someone's been paying close attention, huh? Nico teased. Don't flatter yourself, I shot back, though my face warmed again. He chuckled quietly before saying, You're right, though. I have been showing up more. There was something in the way he said it that made me pause. It felt like there was more he wasn't saying. Is there a reason for that? I asked softly. There is. His voice grew softer, but I could almost hear the smile forming on his lips. Really? What is it? Not so much a what, he said. More of a who. My heart skipped. Oh, do I know them? You might, Nico said, his tone playful. He's kind of a nerd. Brown eyes. Really bad dye job. Sound familiar? I bit back a smile. Nope, doesn't ring a bell. That's a shame, he said lightly. He's actually a really great guy. I pressed my hand to my mouth, hiding the small sound that almost escaped me. Is he now? I asked in a whisper. He is, Nico said, his voice steady. Most of the time anyway. He's also stubborn and way too good at pretending he doesn't care. I laughed quietly. Sounds like a handful. Yeah, Nico said after a beat, his voice softening. But he's worth it. I yawned before I could stop myself. He should probably go to sleep soon though. Yeah, Nico replied gently. It's getting late for him. The warmth in his voice made something in my chest ache. I wanted to keep listening, just to his breathing, his voice, the quiet connection between us that somehow felt more real than anything else. Good night, Wes, Nico said, his tone low and tender. There were so many words I wanted to say, but they all caught in my throat. Good night, Nico. Drive safe, I murmured instead. I will, he said before hanging up. I stared at my phone for a long moment, the sound of waves filling the silence. I miss you, I whispered to the sea, hoping the wind might carry the words to him somehow. Eventually, I made my way back to bed. Benny was still snoring, his face half buried in the pillow. I smiled faintly before lying down, my last thought a quiet wish that the person beside me was someone else. Chapter 22. Benny and I sat at the dining table, both half asleep. He was practically face first in his pancakes, dozing off despite a full night's rest. I wasn't much better. I'd fallen asleep in the early hours and woke up too soon when the sunlight poured into our room. Benny had only managed to drag himself out of bed thanks to the promise of my mom's pancakes. At this rate, though, he'd fall asleep on them instead of eating them. As his head started to dip toward his plate, I flicked his forehead lightly. Benny jerked upright with a startled yelp, his chair screeching backward across the floor. What was that for? He grumbled, rubbing the spot I'd flicked. His nose had a small smear of syrup on it, which only made me laugh harder. I just saved you from a sticky situation, I said, pointing at his syrup-soaked pancakes. Oh, thanks, I guess, Benny muttered, sighing. You could have been gentler, though. I should be the one falling asleep, I said, leaning my cheek on my hand. You have no idea how loud your snoring is. Nope, Benny said with a grin. Lucky you, I replied, taking a bite of my pancakes. Benny stuffed an absurdly large piece into his mouth, cheeks puffed out like a chipmunk. Where's Jamie? He asked through a mouthful, glancing at her closed bedroom door. She's probably still asleep, I said. Of course she is, Benny said, rolling his eyes. She sleeps like a... He stopped mid-sentence when he noticed my mom nearby. Like a log, he finished awkwardly. My mom pretended not to hear, though I saw a small smile tug at her lips. That's what university does to you, apparently, I said with a shrug. I can't wait, Benny said dreamily. You might want to graduate from high school first, I teased. Start with smaller goals, my friend. Bug, whatever, Benny muttered, making my mom chuckle quietly as she flipped another pancake. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed loudly on the table, vibrating its way toward Benny. He glanced at the screen and immediately smirked. What? I asked, frowning. Benny's grin widened. Oh, nothing. Just surprised you're not smiling. I looked down at the caller ID, Sophia. My stomach tightened. Well, that's not the face you're supposed to make when your girlfriend calls, Benny said teasingly. She's not my girlfriend, I said quickly, though the words didn't sound convincing even to me. Benny ignored me, nodding toward the phone. You gonna answer that or what? Yeah, of course, I said, picking it up. Hey, Soph. Wes. You finally picked up, Sophia's cheerful voice chimed through the speaker. Yeah, sorry, I was busy, I said, kicking Benny's leg under the table when he raised an eyebrow at me. Oh, that's fine, Sophia said with a laugh. So, remember how you told me you guys were going to Sorrento? Why yeah, I replied, my pulse quickening. Well, Parker and I decided to take a trip too. We're actually heading to Sorrento right now. Oh, was all I could manage. My chest felt heavy, not from anger, but something close to disappointment. Sophia didn't seem to notice my hesitation, still bubbling with excitement. We can meet up in about an hour. Where will you be? She asked brightly. That sounds great, I said carefully, forcing a small smile. It'll be fun, the four of us together, she continued. Too bad Ratch and Leo couldn't make it. Yeah, that's too bad, I said, trying to sound cheerful. We're having breakfast now, so maybe we can meet at the beach later? Perfect, Sophia said happily. I'll call again when we're close. Parker drives really slowly, so wish us luck. I chuckled. Fingers crossed. Talk soon, Wes, she said, then her voice softened. I miss you. Can't wait to see you. Her words made my heart skip. I swallowed hard. Yeah, me too, I said quietly before ending the call. Benny leaned forward, licking syrup off his fingers. So, Sophia and Parker are coming here, I said, pushing my plate away. Benny immediately pulled it toward himself, happily finishing what I left. Oh, he said with a grin. Guess she couldn't stay away from you, huh? Stop it, Ben. It's not like that, I said, rolling my eyes. But Sophia's voice still echoed in my head. I miss you. Benny smirked. Doesn't look that way from where I'm sitting. Then you're sitting the wrong way, I said, watching Benny shrug with that infuriating grin of his. Hey, language. My mom called from the kitchen before I could say more, making me frown. Benny's grin only widened, clearly enjoying my frustration. Just finish eating, I sighed, shaking my head. Let's get to the beach before they arrive. Benny nodded, lifting his plate and shoveling the rest of his pancakes into his mouth like it was a competition. He thanked my mom mid-chew and she just smiled and waved him off. At least we had an hour or two before Sophia and Parker showed up. After that, I could only hope Sophia wouldn't try to make things more complicated between us. Because honestly, I wasn't sure if I had the courage to stop her. The sun was bright, and the pavement radiated heat beneath my feet as I stood near the boardwalk, tapping my flip-flops impatiently. Benny sat on the railing by the sand, happily devouring a melting ice cream cone. Beside him, Jamie was doing the same, though less successfully. Streaks of ice cream ran down from the edge of her cone onto her chest, just above the red straps of her bikini top. They looked completely carefree, laughing and joking, while I was a tightly wound mess waiting for Sophia and Parker to arrive. Relax, Wes, Jamie said, smirking as I paced back and forth. Oh, let him be, Benny teased. He's just nervous because his girlfriend is about to show up. She's not my girlfriend, I said quickly, but they ignored me. What was her name again? Sophia? Jamie asked, glancing at Benny, who nodded with a grin. Jamie snorted. Honestly, I don't know what she sees in you. She waved her hand as if trying to find the right word. You're just so... Yeah, I get it, I muttered. Truth be told, I didn't really get what Sophia saw in me either. If anything, I probably didn't deserve how kind she was. Before I could reply, Parker's beat-up car pulled into the parking lot. Sophia waved eagerly from inside. Jamie immediately slung her arm around my shoulder and grinned. "Oh, she's adorable," she said, nodding approvingly. "Which makes it even more confusing that she likes you. The world really is full of mysteries." "Thanks, Jamie," I muttered as the car doors opened. Sophia's smile faltered the moment she saw me. Her eyes darted between me and Jamie, her cheeks turning pink before she quickly looked away. Parker, on the other hand, froze. His eyes practically doubled in size when he saw Jamie. "Hey guys." Benny greeted brightly, hugging Sophia and giving Parker a pat on the back. Neither of them responded right away, too busy staring at my sister and me. "Who's this?" Sophia asked softly, glancing between us with uncertainty. "This is my sister, Jamie," I said, wincing slightly as Sophia's face lit up in realization. "Oh, nice to meet you," she said cheerfully, stepping forward to shake Jamie's hand. "I'm Sophia." Jamie laughed, hugging her instead. "Nice to meet you too, Sophia." When they pulled apart, Jamie gave me a mischievous look and mouthed, "She's cute," before raising an eyebrow suggestively. My face heated immediately, and I quickly shook my head. "And I'm Parker," the boy said, stepping forward. He extended his hand toward Jamie, straightening his posture and running a hand through his hair as if he'd just stepped into a movie scene. Benny and I exchanged a look. Parker's smile was bright, maybe too bright, and his eyes flickered from Jamie's face down to her outfit. "Is he seriously flirting with Jamie?" Benny whispered, trying not to laugh. "Obviously," I muttered back. Jamie shook Parker's hand with a knowing smile. As she let go, she untied her hair, letting it fall over her shoulders. I watched Parker gulp, his face turning red as Jamie casually brushed her hair to one side, revealing the curve of her neck. "Watching Jamie mess with him is kind of sad," Benny said, placing a hand over his heart. "Let us all have a moment of silence for poor Parker." I said under my breath. Before Benny could add another joke, Sophia stepped closer and slid her hand into mine. My pulse spiked, and suddenly, the sun felt even hotter. "Now that everyone's here," I said, clearing my throat, "we should probably head to the water." "Good idea," Sophia said, smiling as she gave my hand a gentle squeeze. I tried to ignore the glances from Benny and Jamie. Their teasing smiles said everything. Sophia's touch was warm and gentle, but all I could think was how complicated the day was about to become. This trip was going to be anything but relaxing. Chapter 23. I swallowed hard as Sophia removed her light cover-up, revealing a soft baby pink swimsuit underneath. It wasn't revealing by any means, it covered far more than Jamie's bikini ever did, but the way it fit her made it hard not to notice her natural grace. The straps crossed neatly behind her shoulders, and she tied her hair into a loose braid, exposing the smooth curve of her neck. A few people glanced her way as she stretched, sunlight glinting off her damp skin. "Hey, Wes, can you help me with some sunscreen?" "I can't reach my back," Sophia said, cheeks flushed as she held out the bottle. Benny and Jamie exchanged knowing glances before Benny grabbed Parker by the arm. "Come on, time to swim." Parker stumbled after Jamie, who was already sprinting toward the water. Benny turned back long enough to flash me a mischievous thumbs up before joining them. Sure, no problem," I said, trying to sound casual as I took the bottle. Sophia smiled and turned around, pulling her braid over her shoulder. "Just make sure I don't get sunburned, okay?" "Right?" I said softly, squeezing a bit of lotion into my hands. My cheeks warmed as I began applying it carefully to her shoulders and upper back. Sophia stood still, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "Relax, Wes. It's just sunscreen. Totally normal." Everything was fine until I reached the middle of her back. Sophia gave a tiny shiver at the touch, and my hands froze for a moment. She turned her head slightly, smiling shyly. "Thanks, Wes," she said, her tone quiet but warm. I quickly handed the bottle back to her, trying to steady my voice. "No problem," I managed, my words coming out a little too fast. Sophia's expression softened as she took my hand. "Come on, let's swim." She tugged me toward the water, laughing as we passed Parker, who had just tripped headfirst into the waves. Benny's laughter echoed across the beach as he threw a handful of seaweed in Parker's direction. I waded in until the water reached my waist, the cool waves lapping against my legs. Sophia stood beside me, the sunlight dancing across the surface around her. She slipped her hand around my arm for balance, smiling brightly. "Let's swim over there," she said, nodding toward a cluster of rocks a little farther down the shore. I glanced at Benny, Jamie, and Parker, all too busy splashing each other to notice us. Sophia leaned in slightly, her braid brushing my arm. "They won't even notice if we slip away," she said softly. I hesitated but didn't refuse. Soon, we were wading toward the rocks. Sophia floated easily in the water, while I stayed close to the sand. When we reached the small cove, she playfully hooked her hands over my shoulders to steady herself, both of us laughing as a wave nearly knocked us off balance. "Sorry," I said, helping her stand in the shallow water. "I'm not exactly a great swimmer." "That's okay," Sophia replied kindly, her voice gentle as she brushed her fingers through her damp hair. We sat down on a smooth rock nearby, the water washing around our ankles. Sophia leaned against my arm, her head resting on my shoulder. She looked peaceful, eyes half closed as the wind tousled her braid. I tried to relax, but my thoughts were tangled. Her closeness made me uneasy, not because I disliked her, but because a part of me wished that the warmth I felt came from someone else. Later that evening, we were gathered around the backyard table after dinner. The smell of grilled meat still hung in the air as my mom cleared the plates. "You two could stay here tonight," she suggested cheerfully. Benny nodded eagerly, licking the last bit of sauce from his fingers while Jamie tried to hide her laughter at Parker's delighted expression. Sophia's face, however, flushed deep red. She toyed with the edge of her sundress, sneaking glances at me. "Looks like they've already made up their minds," Benny whispered, elbowing me. "I guess you didn't pack for an overnight trip?" Jamie asked. Parker shook his head so fast it was almost comical. "Well, we can drop by the supermarket to get you toothbrushes," Jamie said with a grin. "And Parker, you can borrow some of my clothes," Benny offered. Then, with that familiar smirk, he added, "And maybe Wes can lend Sophia one of his shirts to sleep in, right?" I glared at him. "Yeah, sure," I muttered, trying not to look at Sophia's crimson face. "Perfect," Mom said brightly, nudging me toward the door. "Jamie can drive you all to the store while I clean up here." "Are you sure, Mrs. Dillon?" Sophia asked kindly, seeing my mom juggle a pile of plates. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Mom replied with a smile. "Go ahead." The five of us piled into Jamie's small car. Parker eagerly claimed the front seat beside her, while the rest of us squeezed into the back. Sophia sat between Benny and me, her shoulder pressed lightly against mine. The short drive was filled with laughter, teasing, and Parker's failed attempts at conversation. When we arrived at the local supermarket, a quiet, cozy store by the beach, Jamie immediately headed for the snack aisle. "You guys grab your stuff. I'm getting chips," she said, already walking off. Benny clapped a hand on Parker's shoulder. "Good luck, my friend. Maybe one day Jamie will see you as something more than a road trip buddy." "Can we not talk about my sister like that?" I said, pretending to gag. Sophia laughed, covering her mouth. Benny grinned and patted Parker's back again. "You'll survive, buddy." "Barely," Parker muttered as we followed Jamie down the aisle, the sound of laughter echoing softly behind us. "Yeah, man, she looks like this now, but give her an hour and you'll see her in full paranormal activity mode," Benny joked, making Parker frown. "If you guys are trying to scare me off, it's not working." "Wes, your sister is really pretty," Parker said confidently. I groaned. "Great. I'm just going to erase that from my memory now," I sighed, pushing my glasses up and pinching the bridge of my nose. Sophia giggled softly at our banter, shaking her head before tugging on my arm to lead me toward the toothbrush aisle. She grabbed 2 affordable toothbrushes and a tube of toothpaste, handing one to Parker. A few minutes later, I noticed Parker suddenly straightening his back, smoothing his hair, and forcing a bright smile. I didn't even need to turn around to know that Jamie had returned. She came striding over, holding 2 large bags of chips like trophies. "They were half price," she said proudly. "Oh, Sweet chili, Benny said with approval. Nice choice. Jamie grinned. I am a woman of fine taste. Benny laughed while Parker stood there, clearly mesmerized. Sophia caught my unimpressed look and smiled knowingly, urging everyone to head back since it was getting late. We paid for our things, Jamie insisting on paying for Parker and Sophia's toothbrushes despite their protests, and drove back home. When we arrived, Mom was already in her pajamas, ready for bed. She looked tired but peaceful, probably still adjusting to a normal sleep schedule after years of night shifts at the hospital. She kissed my cheek and reminded us to lock up before disappearing into her room. Since Sophia and Parker were staying over, Parker was set to share the guest room with Benny, while Sophia would take Jamie's bed. I offered to sleep on the couch. It was comfortable enough, and there were plenty of extra blankets and pillows in the master bedroom closet. Parker and Benny headed off to change, leaving Sophia and me in the living room. She smiled shyly before leaning up to place a quick, gentle kiss on my cheek. My heart skipped. I'll go grab you a shirt to wear, I said, trying to sound casual. Okay, thanks, Wes, she said softly. Inside the bedroom, Benny was scrolling through his phone while Parker was pulling on a pair of Benny's sweatpants. For a brief second, I found myself quietly studying him, not out of interest, but curiosity. Maybe I wanted to see if anything about that moment made me feel something. It didn't. He wasn't the person who came to mind. He wasn't the one with dark hair, sea blue eyes, or the smirk that lingered in my thoughts more often than I wanted to admit. He wasn't Nico. You okay, Wes? Benny asked, glancing up. Yeah, I replied quickly, rummaging through my bag until I found an old, oversized shirt. It was soft and comfortable, printed with a slightly faded cartoon elephant. Oh, go play hero and give that to your girl, Benny teased. Parker snickered. She's not I stopped sighing. I hate you guys. But you love Sophia. Benny called after me. As I stepped out, Sophia was already waiting, cheeks pink as she clasped her hands together. Here, I said, holding out the shirt. It's old but clean. Don't worry. Sophia giggled, holding it up against herself. It's cute. Didn't you know elephants are totally in this season? I laughed, finally relaxing a bit. Clearly, fashion isn't my thing. After that, we went to our separate rooms to change. When everyone was ready, we regrouped in the living room for a movie night. Sophia shyly tugged at the hem of my oversized shirt, which nearly reached her knees. Her hair framed her face softly, and she looked more relaxed than I'd seen her all day. I'm glad it fits, I said. She smiled and nodded, her cheeks still faintly flushed. A moment later, Parker's eyes widened. Oh my! Jamie had just stepped out of her room, wearing an old t-shirt and sweatpants, her face covered in a bright green face mask and her hair tied in a messy bun. And the Hulk appears, Benny said, earning a playful smack from Jamie. She's adorable, Parker whispered dreamily. Benny stared at him in disbelief. That's your definition of cute? Jamie overheard and promptly gave Benny another light whack on the back of the head, sending us all into laughter. Before long, we were piled together on the L-shaped couch, watching a movie. By the time the credits rolled, Jamie and Sophia were already asleep. Parker carefully helped Sophia to her room, while Benny guided Jamie off to bed. The house soon grew quiet. I settled down on the couch with a blanket, scrolling through my phone when I noticed a missed call. My chest tightened as I saw the name on the screen. I stepped out onto the porch, sitting on the hammock under the cool night air. The phone rang once, twice, then clicked. Took you long enough to call me back, Wes, a familiar voice teased through the receiver. I smiled, closing my eyes as relief washed over me. Sorry, Nico, I whispered, my heart steadying at the sound of his voice. Chapter 24. Can't sleep again? Nico's voice came softly through the phone, his tone calm yet knowing. I sighed, letting my weight sink into the hammock. I guess not. Sophia and Parker joined us tonight, I said, letting my words hang in the air. Nico didn't respond immediately. Only the faint sound of his breathing came through the speaker, so quiet I had to close my eyes to focus on it. Did you spend the night with her? Nico finally asked. I nearly fell out of the hammock. My phone slipped in my hand as I grabbed the edge to steady myself. What? Of course not. I stammered, my heart pounding. Why would you even think that? She still likes you, Nico said simply. I could hear him pull his car over, the sound of the engine lowering and the faint click of a button as he turned the radio down. You're driving and talking again, I muttered, grateful for the distraction. I didn't want to think about Sophia, or what Nico's words might mean. Gotta get home from work somehow, Wes, he said, a faint smile in his voice. Despite myself, I smiled too. Somehow, Nico always managed to shift my mood without even trying. How was work? I asked, rolling onto my side as the hammock swayed. My phone rested against my ear while I absent-mindedly picked at a loose thread. Was work, Nico replied with a sigh. I could imagine him reclining in his car seat, the window slightly open so the night breeze could drift in. Somehow, the thought comforted me that maybe, despite the miles between us, we were sharing the same quiet air. You sound tired, I said softly. He hummed in response. We should hang up so you can get home, I told him, though a part of me wished he'd say no, that he'd want to keep talking just a little longer. But not yet, Nico said after a pause. I want to talk to you a bit more. My chest tightened. I felt my face grow warm and quickly pulled the blanket over me. As long as you're not driving, I teased, trying to sound casual. Yeah, okay, Mum, he joked, and I could practically see his smirk. Shut up, Nico, I said with a laugh, my voice softer than I intended. You hang up then, he said playfully. I stayed silent, smiling to myself. Can't do it? You like my voice that much, Wes? He teased again. I bit my lip, trying not to smile too wide. You're so full of yourself. Don't lie to me, Wes, Nico said quietly this time, his voice lower, almost serious. The tone sent shivers down my spine. It felt like he wasn't just talking about liking his voice. It felt like he was saying something more. And suddenly, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. I like Nico Beckett. The thought came so easily that it scared me. I stopped breathing for a moment as the realization echoed in my head. I'm hanging up, I said quickly. Good night, Wes, Nico replied, clearly amused. I ended the call before he could say anything else, staring blankly into the night sky. My heart was racing. No matter how much I tried to deny it, the words repeated in my mind, soft but certain. I really do like Nico Beckett. Since checkout was early, we were up before sunrise, half awake, dragging ourselves into the car for the drive home. Parker and Sophia had left earlier in his car. Sophia gave me a quick hug and a kiss on the cheek before leaving, cheerful as always. Now, it was just me, Mum, Benny, and Jamie in our car. The faint hum of an old 80s song filled the background, mixing with Benny's soft snoring. Mum glanced in the rearview mirror and chuckled quietly. Benny's face was squished against the window, his cheek flattened like dough, while Jamie's head was tilted back, mouth open, eyes half-lidded in a sleep so deep it looked unnatural. I grimaced as a small line of drool glistened on her chin. Never a morning person, your sister, Mum said, shaking her head with a smile. Benny's not doing any better, I said, smirking at my best friend's unflattering position. And that's why I have you navigating for me, Mum said warmly, reaching across to pat my arm. Now, since those two are asleep, care to tell me what's going on with you and Sophia? I nearly choked on air. What do you mean? Asked what if. Mum shot me an unimpressed look as the car stopped at a red light. Oh, come on, Wes. I saw how she looked at you. I turned toward the window to hide my blush. Mum, we're just friends, I mumbled. She sighed, smiling knowingly. Sure, honey. But I don't think a girl looks at a boy like that and calls it just friendship. I stayed silent, staring out at the passing scenery, but my mind wasn't on Sophia anymore. It was on Nico. Mum, what are you talking about? I asked, tapping my foot anxiously against the carpeted car mat. She glanced at me with a grin as the light turned green. You and Sophia are adorable together. If you ask her out, I'm sure she'd say yes. It would be nice for you to have such a sweet girlfriend like her. Girlfriend. The word echoed in my head, heavy and unsettling. I turned to look out the window, watching the colors of the trees blur into a dizzying mix of green and gold. Mum, I'm not, I hesitated, forcing the words out. It's not like that with her. Not like it is with Nico. Mum glanced into the rearview mirror as Jamie began to stir in the back seat. My sister yawned loudly, wiping away drool with the back of her hand before slumping against the seat again. Mum chuckled and patted my arm. I'll drop it for now, Wes, she said with a knowing smile. But I still think you two would make a nice couple. Mom, I groaned, pressing my palms to my ears in embarrassment. She laughed softly as I turned back to the window, the inside of the car suddenly feeling too warm, too small. I wished I could be somewhere else. Maybe in that quiet house surrounded by flowers, the one that always smelled faintly of earth and rain. I'm going to take a nap, Jamie announced as soon as we got home after dropping Benny off. Mum and I exchanged a look. She slept the entire car ride, Mum muttered, shaking her head. Does she ever do anything else? I asked, grabbing a few heavy bags from the trunk. Thanks, honey, Mum said, giving my shoulder a gentle squeeze. Her smile was soft but tired, the lightness she had earlier already fading. I figured she was just worn out from the drive home. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. I took a shower, grabbed a snack, and eventually dragged Jamie out of bed for dinner. By the time night fell, the house had gone still. Mum had turned in early, and Jamie disappeared into her room to cram for her upcoming assignments. Lying in bed, I felt restless. My fingers tapped against my leg as I stared at the ceiling. I couldn't focus on anything. TV, my phone, even music. It felt like an itch under my skin, a pull I couldn't shake. What is wrong with me? I muttered, rolling onto my stomach and burying my face into my pillow. I squeezed it tightly, trying to find comfort, but the image that flashed in my mind made my breath catch. My arms froze around the pillow. I could almost picture his face, his faint smile, his quiet voice saying my name. The more I tried not to think about him, the more I did. I sighed, pressing the heels of my palms into my eyes until I saw white spots. I knew what this feeling was. I missed him. The phone calls, the late-night talks, they weren't enough anymore. It had only been 3 days since I last saw him, but it felt like weeks. I sat up, running a hand through my hair, my heart pounding as an idea formed. Before I could second-guess myself, I slipped on my shoes, threw on a jacket, and quietly stepped outside. The cool night air brushed against my skin as I walked down the familiar road toward Nico's house, the one covered in vines and flowers that always seemed alive, even in the dark. When I reached his porch, I hesitated for a brief moment before pressing the doorbell. My heart raced as I heard footsteps approaching from inside, each one heavier, closer. Then came the soft click of the lock. And suddenly he was there. Nico opened the door, eyes wide in surprise. Wes. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words stuck in my throat, tangled with everything I felt but didn't know how to say. Before I could think twice, I stepped forward and pulled him into a hug. He froze for a second, then his arms wrapped around me, warm and firm, like coming home after being lost for too long. I missed you, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Nico didn't say anything. He just held me tighter, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with the night air. And for that moment, it was enough. Chapter 25. Nico. I breathed, my voice unsteady. He blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting to see me standing at his door in the middle of the night. Before he could speak again, I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him. For a brief moment, he froze. Then, slowly, his arms came around me, firm and warm. I could feel his heartbeat against my cheek, fast but steady. I missed you, I said quietly. Nico exhaled a shaky laugh, his hand finding the back of my head. You came all this way to tell me that? I couldn't sleep, I admitted, voice muffled against his shoulder. It just didn't feel right, not talking to you. Nico smiled faintly, resting his chin on the top of my head. You could have just called. I looked up at him, eyes meeting his. Would you have answered? He didn't reply right away. His eyes softened, and for a moment, neither of us said a word. The air between us grew still, heavy with everything we didn't know how to say. Finally, Nico spoke again, his voice gentler. You shouldn't be out this late. I know, I murmured, unable to look away. But I needed to see you. Something flickered in Nico's expression. Conflict, maybe, or something deeper. Then he sighed, his hand brushing lightly against my cheek. You're impossible. I've been told that, I said with a small smile. He chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. Come in before you catch a cold. I followed him inside, closing the door behind me. The familiar scent of flowers from his garden lingered faintly in the air, mixed with something uniquely him. For a moment, we just stood there in the dim light of the hallway, facing each other. The silence wasn't awkward, it was charged, meaningful. When Nico finally spoke, his voice was soft. You really missed me, huh? I nodded, a shy laugh escaping my lips. Maybe more than I should have. Nico smiled, but it wasn't his usual teasing smirk, it was warmer, more real. Then I guess that makes two of us. We both stood still, caught between the comfort of friendship and something that felt dangerously close to more. My heart pounded as his hand brushed mine. Just barely, but it was enough to send a spark through me. I should probably let you rest, I said after a long pause, though my voice wavered. Yeah, he replied, his eyes lingering on mine. But I'm glad you came. I smiled faintly, the tension in my chest easing just a little. Me too. He walked me to the door, and as I stepped outside, the night air felt lighter somehow, like the world had shifted just a bit. Good night, Wes, he said, leaning against the doorway. Good night, Nico. I took a few steps before turning back. He was still there watching me. Our eyes met one last time, and in that quiet exchange, I realized something simple yet undeniable. It wasn't just missing him anymore. It was something deeper. Something I wasn't ready to name, but couldn't ignore. The air between us was heavy with unspoken emotion. Nico's eyes locked with mine, a mixture of desire and hesitation flickering in their icy blue depths. My hands trembled slightly as they rested on his chest, feeling the rapid rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my palms. He reached up, brushing his thumb across my cheek. Wes, he murmured, voice rough around the edges. You don't have to. I want to, I interrupted, my voice barely a whisper. I need to know this isn't just in my head. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he closed the distance between us, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that was deep, slow, and charged with everything we'd both been holding back. The world around us faded. There was only the sound of our breathing and the faint rustle of sheets as we fell back together. Every touch was careful, deliberate, like he was memorizing me. There were no words, just shared gasps, quiet laughter, and the kind of closeness that stripped away every barrier we'd built between us. When it was over, we stayed tangled in each other's arms. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the night beyond the window. Nico's hair was damp, his skin warm against mine as he traced gentle lines down my back. He tilted his head to look at me, smiling softly. So, he said, voice low and tired but content. So, I echoed, smiling back. That wasn't too bad, Nico teased, his smirk returning, though there was warmth behind it. Maybe even better than last time. I laughed quietly. I was too drunk to remember much of last time. He raised an eyebrow. You remember everything, Wes. Our laughter faded into silence again, but it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful, like we'd finally found a quiet understanding. Then, with a more serious tone, Nico asked, You don't regret this again, do you? His question hung in the air. Did I? The first time we'd crossed this line, everything had been hazy and uncertain. But now I felt every heartbeat, every breath, every piece of him that had reached me in a way words never could. I met his gaze and shook my head slowly. No, I whispered. Nico exhaled, relief softening his features. He leaned forward, pressing a lingering kiss to my lips. Good, he said quietly, because neither do I. I smiled faintly, closing my eyes as I rested my head against his chest. His arms tightened around me, steady and warm, grounding me in that fragile moment of peace. And for the first time in a long while, everything felt right. Chapter 26. It was a familiar warmth. I smiled as I felt the steady rise and fall of Nico's breathing against my back, his arms wrapped snugly around my waist. When I shifted slightly, his hold tightened, and a sleepy grumble rumbled from his chest, making me chuckle softly. Instead of pulling away, I rested my hands over his, our fingers naturally intertwining. My cheeks flushed when I dared to brush my feet against his leg, the contact sending a surprising rush of comfort through me. Nico only smiled against my hair and draped a leg over mine, holding me even closer. "Morning, Nico," I whispered. He murmured something unintelligible, half asleep, and buried his face against the back of my neck. "Nico, you're holding me too tight," I said, laughing quietly. "You're heavy." "Not letting you go," he mumbled, voice still groggy. "You'll just run away again." I laughed and pinched his side playfully. "You're ridiculous." He chuckled but didn't loosen his hold. I sighed and nestled closer, breathing in his familiar scent, something that somehow made me feel both safe and uneasy at the same time. "Nico, I really have to go," I finally said. "Is that an excuse to escape?" he teased, peeking one eye open. I shook my head, trying to look serious. "No, seriously, let me up before I regret it." Nico laughed quietly and leaned over me, his messy hair falling into his face. "You wouldn't dare." Before I could respond, he kissed the side of my mouth, a gentle, teasing touch that made me forget how to breathe. I tried to act annoyed, but when his lips brushed mine again, I gave up pretending. Our kiss deepened, slow and unhurried, until the world outside the blankets no longer mattered. The morning light spilled softly through the curtains as if afraid to disturb us. When we finally broke apart, both of us slightly out of breath, Nico looked at me with disbelief and quiet wonder. "You're really here," he whispered, brushing his thumb across my cheek. "Something's changed, hasn't it?" "Maybe," I said, voice small. My face grew warm under his gaze. He smiled and gently pinched my cheek. "Still so easily embarrassed. At least you're not hitting me this time." "Don't push it," I warned, shoving him playfully before glancing at the clock behind him. My eyes widened. "Oh no, I'm late." I scrambled out of bed, nearly tripping as I searched for my clothes scattered across the room. Nico watched, amused, tossing me my pants. "This looks familiar," he teased. "Running out of my room again, huh? Third time's the charm." "Not funny," I groaned. "Hand me my shirt." He dangled it just out of reach. "This one." "Nico, please. I'm late." "Come and get it then," he said, smiling mischievously. I rolled my eyes, climbing onto the bed to grab it, but before I could, he caught me and pulled me down beside him, laughing. "Nico." "Wes," he echoed, laughing even harder at my glare. "You're impossible," I muttered. "Maybe," he said with a grin. "But I'll let you go if you give me a kiss." I sighed, pretending to be annoyed, then leaned forward and kissed his cheek quickly. "Happy now?" "Very," he said, smiling like he'd just won something. I threw on my shirt and shoes, glancing at the clock again. "Great. I'm definitely going to be late." "You're not going to school?" I asked as he crawled back under the blankets. "If I wake up," he mumbled. "I'll see you later then," I said, my voice softer than I intended. His smile made my chest feel strangely tight. There was still so much unsaid between us, so many questions I was too afraid to ask. Afraid that I wouldn't like the answers. I muttered a quick goodbye and rushed out of the room. By some miracle, I made it home to find Jamie still asleep. After a quick shower and change, I bolted for the door again, skipping breakfast entirely. "If I run, I can still catch the train," I muttered to myself as I sprinted down the street. Just as I turned the corner, a car rolled up beside me, matching my pace. "Need a lift?" I turned and froze when I saw Nico behind the wheel, smirking. "What, weren't you asleep?" I asked, panting. "Try to be," he said with a grin, leaning over to open the passenger door. "You coming or not?" I hesitated only for a second before jumping in. As he drove, his hand reached for mine, resting gently between us. "What are you doing?" I asked quietly, glancing at him. He didn't look away from the road. "You don't like it?" I blushed but didn't pull away. Instead, I intertwined our fingers, squeezing lightly. He smiled. We didn't speak for the rest of the ride, but we didn't let go either. When Nico parked in front of the school, I spotted Sophia and Parker walking nearby. My heart sank as I instinctively ducked down in my seat. "Wait," I said, gripping his hand. He laughed softly, closing the door again. "What is it, Wes? Can we just stay like this for a minute? We're still early." He looked out the window, following my gaze until he saw Sophia. His expression softened. "Sure," he said quietly. Then, after a moment, "But we can't stay like this forever." "I know," I said, forcing a small smile. Sophia and I had been holding on to something that wasn't real anymore, something I couldn't give her, not now. Not with Nico sitting beside me, his fingers laced through mine, and my heart already knowing where it belonged. Chapter 27. "Do you really have to walk next to me?" I muttered under my breath, sidestepping to put a little space between Nico and me as we crossed the school parking lot. The whispers around us grew louder with every step. I could feel dozens of curious eyes watching, and my shoulders tensed under the attention. Nico, on the other hand, didn't seem to care at all. He simply smirked and stepped closer until our shoulders brushed again. "Did you say something, Wes?" he teased, leaning down to whisper close enough for only me to hear. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I grumbled, trying to move away. "Thoroughly," he said with a grin and a playful wink. I rolled my eyes, realizing there was no escaping him. The more I resisted, the more he matched my every move. Giving up, I sighed and tried to ignore the waves of murmurs spreading through the crowd. "I can't believe you're not bothered by all this," I said, watching a group of students pointing at us not so subtly. "You get used to the attention," Nico replied casually, as if being the center of gossip was just another part of his day. "Right, Mr. Popular," I said sarcastically, pretending to gag. He only laughed, clearly enjoying my discomfort. By the time we stepped through the front doors, the chatter was louder than ever. Students lingered by their lockers, their conversations forgotten as they stared openly. It was like walking down a hallway full of paparazzi. Then a loud, sharp voice cut through the noise. "What is that supposed to mean?" I didn't even need to look to know who it was. Alyssa. She stood by her locker, eyes wide, mouth hanging open in disbelief. Her perfectly manicured hand pointed straight at us, and her friends whispered frantically beside her. I caught her gaze and couldn't resist smirking. She looked absolutely scandalized. Nico didn't even glance her way. He just leaned against the wall near my locker while I rummaged through it, holding my books for me like nothing unusual was happening. Alyssa's glare burned into my back, but instead of feeling uncomfortable, I kind of enjoyed it. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Nico said, mimicking my earlier words. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied with fake innocence, batting my lashes. He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "Sure, you don't." Before I could say more, a familiar voice called out, "Hey, Wes. Long time no, wait, oh my gosh." I turned to see Benny, frozen mid-step, eyes darting between me and Nico. "Morning, Benny," I greeted casually, shutting my locker and taking my books from Nico's hands. "Thanks, Nico." "Anytime," Nico said, nodding toward Benny. "Hey." Hey, Benny squeaked, voice cracking. Nico snorted under his breath, earning himself a light kick from me. Before I could lecture him, the bell rang. "I'll see you in bio," Nico said, already pulling a cigarette from his pocket. "You're not going to class?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He shook his head and placed the cigarette between his lips. "Maybe later," he said, ruffling my hair before I could stop him. "Hey," I started, but he was already walking away. The hallway seemed to exhale as the doors closed behind him, the whispers slowly dying down. Then Benny grabbed my arm. "Wes, what on earth was that?" "What was what?" I asked, feigning confusion. "Nico Beckett," he hissed, his voice rising in disbelief. Heads turned instantly, students pretending not to eavesdrop. "Oh, we're biology partners," I said, trying not to laugh at his expression. "I thought I mentioned that?" Benny's jaw dropped. "That doesn't explain why you walked to school with him." "Anyway, I've got to get to class. See you at lunch." I called over my shoulder. "Wes, You can't just leave me with that. Benny shouted after me. Wesley! Hey! I waved a hand. Bye, Benny. At lunch, I plopped down beside him at our usual table, cheerful as ever. Hey guys! I said brightly. Didn't have time to pack lunch today. I forgot how long that cafeteria line is. No one answered. Everyone just stared at me. Rachel had paused mid-study, pushing her glasses up her nose as she examined me like I was part of a mystery she had to solve. Leo froze mid-bite, his forkful of chicken falling back into his container. Parker's eyes gleamed with amusement, and Sophia, sitting directly across from me, looked more concerned than curious. What? I asked, swallowing a mouthful of pasta. You tell us, Parker said, raising a brow. I heard Nico made you his assistant or something, that you spent the morning running errands for him. Leo snorted. No way, I heard Wes got initiated into Nico's group. Like, full-on recruitment. Jesse from Chem told me you're doing Nico's homework because he's failing everything, Rachel added, voice careful. I laughed. Okay, that last part's kind of true. But the rest? Completely wrong. Benny suddenly leaned forward, pale as a ghost. He said, to me this morning, he whispered. Do you think that was a warning? Oh no, he's going to come after me, isn't he? Relax, Benny, I said, patting his shoulder. He's not going to hurt you. You all need to stop believing every wild story that goes around. But why did you come to school together? Rachel asked. I shrugged. He gave me a ride. That's it. Benny clutched his chest dramatically. I can't handle this, he exclaimed, pretending to faint as the others burst into laughter. I shook my head with a grin, twirling my fork in the pasta. You guys are unbelievable. Oh my gosh, he really did initiate you into his gang, Parker said, letting out a playful whistle. What gang? I laughed, waving off the idea with a hand. We're just friends, seriously. Friends? That word felt heavier than it should. Friends? Sophia said quietly. It was the first word she'd spoken since I sat down. Her tone was calm, but there was something cold underneath it. There's no way you could be friends with someone like him. Someone like him? I repeated, my shoulders stiffening. What's that supposed to mean, Soph? Sophia frowned, her expression tightening. Wes, it's obvious he's just using you. He's been known for getting help from others when he's struggling in class. He doesn't take school seriously, and he's always in trouble. People say he hangs out with the wrong crowd, skips classes, and she hesitated before lowering her voice. He's not exactly known for treating people kindly. You deserve better company. You should tell a teacher what's happening before he gets you in trouble too. Her concern might have come from a good place, but her words cut deep. What are you even talking about? I snapped, jerking my hand away from hers. Everyone at the table froze, surprised by my tone. What? Sophia blinked, startled. You don't even know him, I said, my voice tight. You're just repeating what everyone else says without ever talking to him yourself. Her frown deepened. I know what I've seen, Wes. Everyone knows how he acts. He's always getting into fights, and he doesn't care about school rules. I just don't want you getting hurt. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Her words weren't just rumors anymore. They were judgments. So, because you've heard things, that makes them true? I asked sharply. You think that's fair? Wes, you're defending him, she said softly, clearly confused by my anger. And what's wrong with that? I shot back. He's my friend, and he doesn't deserve to be talked about like that when you don't even know the full story. Sophia's mouth fell open, her eyes shining with tears. Wes, this isn't like you, she said, her voice trembling. If he's making you uncomfortable, we can talk to the teachers together. Stop it, Sophia, I interrupted more firmly than I meant to. Nico isn't like that. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Sophia's lip quivered before she stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Without another word, she ran from the table, her braids swaying as she disappeared through the cafeteria doors. You didn't have to talk to her like that, Parker said, his voice sharp with disapproval. She was just worried about you. He grabbed Sophia's things and followed after her. The table fell into uneasy silence. Rachel and Leo exchanged glances, unsure whether to speak. Benny looked at me with wide eyes, torn between confusion and concern. Unable to bear their stares, I picked up my things. Not feeling well, I muttered before walking away. No one stopped me. As expected, Nico was in the old storeroom behind the gym. When I opened the door, he looked up immediately, his familiar half-smile fading when he saw my face. He dropped the cigarette he'd been holding and stepped closer. "Rough day?" he asked quietly. "Don't ask," I said, sinking down beside him. My untouched lunch sat on the stack of foam kickboards, the pasta cold. Nico didn't push for answers. He just moved a little closer until our shoulders touched. The tension I'd been carrying all afternoon began to ease, and I let out a deep sigh. "Pretty sure my friends hate me now," I said quietly. Sophia?" Nico asked, his tone gentle. I nodded. I didn't tell her about Lias, but I kind of snapped at her. I winced at the memory. Actually, kind of is an understatement. "What did she say?" he asked, eyes narrowing slightly. I laughed bitterly. "You're assuming she was the one in the wrong? You don't usually get angry for no reason," Nico said, his voice low but sincere. "So yeah, I'm guessing she said something that crossed the line." His words made my chest ache. Somehow, he always knew how to see through me. I hesitated, fiddling with the edge of his tie as he gently pulled me closer, his hands resting at my back. "She was saying things about you," I admitted. "Not very nice things." "Oh?" Nico asked softly, leaning his forehead against mine. "And what kind of things?" "I'd rather not repeat them," I said, grimacing. "Let's just say, she got the wrong idea about you." Nico gave a small, knowing smile and nodded. "And what did you say to her?" I let out a shaky breath. "That she was wrong. That she doesn't know you the way I do." For a moment, Nico didn't speak. Then his smile softened. "You're really something, you know that?" he murmured, brushing a thumb across my arm. "Maybe you're just a bad influence," I joked, and he laughed quietly. "Do you really think that?" "Of course not," I said, resting my head on his shoulder. The tension from earlier melted away as I inhaled the faint scent of his cologne mixed with the outdoors. "Thanks, Wes," he said softly, his hand brushing gently through my hair. I didn't answer, just closed my eyes and held onto the quiet between us, where everything finally felt safe again. Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.